From 1971 to 1974, he worked as a flight instructor in Hangzhou, near Bonn, in West Germany, and also flew in fly-ins with other wartime pilots. He was one of only 27 German soldiers in World War II to receive the diamonds to his Knight's Cross. Hartmann was summoned to Hitler's Wolfslayer headquarters, in East Prussia to receive the award from Hitler personally. The economic downturn that followed World War I in Germany forced his father to find work in China, and Erich spent his early childhood there. They returned to Germany in 1928, after the Chinese Civil War started. In 1936, the 14-year-old Hartmann became a gliding instructor in the Hitler Youth. In 1937, at the age of 15, he got his pilot's license, allowing him to fly powered aircraft. Hartmann's flying career began when he joined the glider training program of the Luftwaffe and was taught to fly by his mother. The Hartmann family also owned a light aircraft but were forced to sell it in 1932, due to economic problems. He died on September 20, 1993, at the age of 71, in Weil-am-Schomburg, in Germany. In 2016, his former German Air Force unit, JG-71, honored him by applying his tulip color scheme to their aircraft. In January 1997, after his death, his case was reviewed by the chief military prosecutor in Moscow, after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, and he was posthumously acquitted of all historical charges against him in Russian law. It was decided he had been wrongly convicted. He began his military training on October 1, 1940, at the 10th Flying Regiment in New Kuren. On March 1, 1941, he progressed to the Luftkriegsschule II, making his first flight with an instructor on March 5, followed by his first solo flight. During his imprisonment, his son, Erich Peter, was born in 1945 and died at the age of 3 in 1948, without his father ever seeing him. After his release, Hartmann and his wife Ursula had a daughter, named Ursula Isabel, born on February 23, 1957. During his decade in the Soviet prison system, the Soviets tried to convince him to cooperate with them. He was asked to spy on fellow officers, but he refused and was sentenced to 10 days solitary confinement. He slept on a concrete floor and was fed bread and water. And on one occasion, he claimed the Soviets threatened to kidnap and murder his wife. He flew his first combat mission on October 14, 1942. When he encountered 10 enemy aircraft, Hartmann opened full throttle and separated from his wingman. He engaged an enemy fighter, but didn't score any hits and almost crashed into it. He ran for cover in the low cloud, and shortly after crashed after his plane ran out of fuel. He claimed the German pilots themselves learned from their enemy. Oil freezing in the DB605 engines of the Bf-109G6 made them difficult to start in the Russian winter. A Soviet POW showed them how pouring fuel into the aircraft's oil sump would thaw the oil and enable the engine to start on the first try. Another solution was to ignite fuel under the engine. His usual method of attack was to hold fire until he was very close, then unleash a short burst at point-blank range. This technique meant he revealed his position only at the last possible moment, compensated for the low muzzle velocity of the slower-firing 30mm Mk108, on some of the later Bf-109 models, placed his shots accurately with minimum waste of ammunition, prevented his enemy from taking evasive action. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison on December 27, 1949. The sentence was carried out by the Ministry of Internal Affairs in the Ivanovo district of Russia. He was condemned for atrocities against Soviet citizens, the attack on military objects and destruction of Soviet aircraft and therefore significant damage to the Soviet economy. Hartmann protested multiple times against this judgment. In June 1951, he was charged again, this time for being a member of an anti-Soviet group. On March 31, 1942, during a gunnery training flight, he ignored regulations and performed some aerobatics in his Bf-109 over the Zerbst airfield. His punishment was a week of confinement to quarters, with the loss of 2/3 of his pay in fines. Hartmann discussed the incident that had saved his life, saying, "That week confined to my room actually saved my life. I had been scheduled to go up on a gunnery flight the afternoon that I was confined. My roommate took the flight instead of me, in an aircraft I had been scheduled to fly. Shortly after he took off, while on his way to the gunnery range, he developed engine trouble and had to crash land near the Hindenburg-Katowice Railroad. He was killed in the crash." Afterward, Hartmann changed his ways, and adopted a new motto which he passed on to other pilots. "Fly with your head, not with your muscles." His last aerial victory occurred over Brno, in Czechoslovakia, on May 8, 1945. That morning, he was ordered to fly a reconnaissance mission and report the position of Soviet forces. Hartmann took off with his wingman at 8:30 a.m., and spotted the first Soviet units 25 miles away. Passing over the area, Hartmann saw a Soviet Yak-9, and ambushed it from 12,000 feet, and shot it down. When he landed, Hartmann was told the Soviet forces were within artillery range of the airfield, so he and the other pilots destroyed 24 other Bf-109s, and a large amount of ammunition. Hartmann and fellow pilot Hermann Graf were ordered to fly to the British sector to avoid capture by Soviet forces, while the remainder of JG-52 was ordered to surrender to the approaching Soviets. Hartmann chose to surrender his unit to members of the U.S. 90th Infantry Division.